Welcome to the It's One Louder podcast. Your host, PJ Pat, has done absolutely nothing that you would know about, but don't fret. PJ Pat's passion for rock, hard rock, and heavy metal will no doubt please all headbangers. So turn up the volume one louder and enjoy the show.
What's going on, rock stars out there? This is PJ Pat, your best bud. And I've got my sidekick Steve here with me. He's always there, always by my side, never leaves me. I mean, what more can you ask for as a friend, right? You're awesome, Steve, by the way. Okay, cool. So today, I'm really excited to read an article from this magazine. It's one of my old school ones, released December 2002. And it's from Guitar World. And look at that. The man himself, Tom Morello, the guitar hero himself. I mean, this guy's a definition of a guitar hero, right? His own sound, his own tone, his own style, just unbelievable. When that first Rage album broke out, I mean, we hadn't heard anything before that and anything since really like it. So a true legend himself. So excited to read you this article. So I'll get right into it. The name of the article is called Power Slave, and it was written by Alan DiPerma. And check this amazing photograph out. Look at that. Photography by Ross Halflin, the legend himself. Ross has photographed pretty much the royalty of rock, you know, from Metallica, Def Leppard, all the bands in the 80s to even now. Really cool pic. And this is his famous guitar, Soul Power. I think Fender came out with a Soul Power replica. I actually tried it in the store. That thing is so heavy. Super heavy. I don't know what's in there, but I think there's one written that's like an exact replica that's written Soul Power on it, and another one that's not, but you can correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section. Yeah, so as you can see, it's like a Strat, but it's like a glossy black finish, but the pickguard is mirror, so it has a really cool look. All right, enough about guitar geeky stuff. Here we go. Let's get right into it. Power Slave. Rising from the ashes of Rage Against the Machine, Tom Morello joins with former Soundgarden vocalist Chris Cornell to form a supergroup for the new millennium. Yep, you guessed it. Audioslave! It was a liberating experience, says Tom Morello. The guitarist is not talking about some Rock for Choice concert, a Mumia Abu Jabal rally, or any of the other political activities that occupy his time as rock's foremost revolutionary insurgent guitar guerrilla. Morello is referring rather to the first musical meeting that took place between ex-Soundgarden vocalist Chris Cornell and the remnants of Morello's former band, Rage Against the Machine. This initial jam was the start of what may prove to be the next rock supergroup, Audioslave. Chris has a very penetrating and unique artistic vision that when melded with ours makes for a unique band chemistry, says Morello of his new lead singer. It's such a different vibe than any of us has ever experienced before. There's a great deal of camaraderie. If politics makes for strange bedfellows, where does that leave rock? Morello, bassist Tim Comerford, and drummer Brad Wilk have been on the rebound ever since dreadlocked, confrontational singer Zack de la Rocha, or Rasha, quit Rage Against the Machine in 2000, making his exit shortly after Comerford disrupted that year's MTV Awards with a Neanderthal display of rage all of his own. Cornell has been out of Soundgarden since the group broke up in 1997, and he released a solo album, Euphoria Morning, in 1999. Amazing album, by the way. You should check that out. Soundgarden and Rage were both big-time players in the heavy rock 90s, but apart from loud guitars, the two bands have very little in common, stylistically. Soundgarden personified the more metal side of Seattle grunge, while Rage Against the Machine brewed up a brand new blend of rap, metal, and radical politics, setting the stage for new metal acts that picked up on Rage's aggression, if not their social conscience. So how were the veterans of these two very different bands able to find a common musical ground? We certainly weren't going to ask Chris to rap, laughs Morello. Nor was he going to ask us to play in funny time signatures. That could have been a disaster on both ends. From the day we started playing with Chris, it was crystal clear that this was a brand new band. It was neither Soundgarden nor Rage Against the Machine, although it was two great tastes that taste great together. The new quartet found its footing amid the timeless values of classic rock, soaring vocal melodies and swaggering guitar-driven grooves. Produced by Rick Rubin, Audioslave's self-titled debut album is long on big bottom riff rockers like Set It Off and the debut single Cochise, not to mention tuneful, panoramic, radio-ready ballads like I Am the Highway and Like a Stone. Songs that seem certain to send cigarette lighters aloft in stadiums across the globe. The music flowed freely from the first minute Cornell and the Rage threesome hooked up. Other things are more complicated. Shortly after the Audioslave album was completed, Cornell left the group amid managerial disputes and rumors of alcoholic dysfunctionality. Cornell eventually returned to the fold and peace was restored, but not before Audioslave were compelled to withdraw from what had been meant to be the band's Ozfest debut. Meanwhile, some purloined demos began to surface on the internet, purporting to be the new Audioslave album. "We were furious," said Morello, "and I'd just like to make it clear that the music of ours that appeared on the internet is not our album. It is not the same songs, the same recording, the same vocal lyrics, or guitar solos. It was rehearsal demos from over a year ago that were stolen from a studio and happened to leak out on the internet by the spring. But they have as much in common with the album as a hunk of coal has in common with a diamond." Morello is a rare breed among rock guitar heroes. Harvard educated, he speaks with a precise, easy command of language rare among rock and rollers, waxing enthusiastic over a visit he made to Bolshevik hero Lenin's tomb in Moscow and confessing his obsession with sadly overlooked near-90s LA rock band The Nymphs, fronted by the clinically insane but nonetheless alluring Inger Lorre. Hope I said that right. As a player, Morello is in a category all of his own. On one hand, his effects-laden, harmonically distressed approach seems to take a major cue from a post-punk school of noise guitar, espoused by groups like Gang of Four, Sonic Youth, and My Bloody Valentine. But, coming more from a metal background, he brings a shredder's sense of discipline to the minefield of six-string sonic mayhem. The results are unlike anything in all of rock. The Audioslave album is filled with those blasts of unidentified flying feedback that Rage fans have come to know and love, but there's something else as well, something we've never really heard from Morello before. Blues licks, jazzy runs, bursts of pagey bluster, all of which indicates that, while there's still plenty of rage in Morello's machine, there's also an unexpected core of heart and soul. That all comes from the liberated vibe we had in the rehearsal room, he says. You could play a solo like that, and it would be accepted. You just felt like you could be open and honest in the music, and that's what came out of the tape. The Revolution's most stalwart guitar soldier stands at ease. Guitar World. How was Chris Cornell chosen as your new singer? Tom Morello says, after Zack left, Tim, Brad, and I were confident that we all wanted to remain together and be a band. There was an irreplaceable chemistry between us. The hard part was to see what would happen when we plugged in another element. And Chris is basically the only singer we played with. He's always been one of our favorite singers, and I think he's one of the greatest rock singers of all time. Amen to that. That's for me. Producer Rick Rubin and I drove up to his house one day, and we talked about what he was doing and what we were doing. We made it clear to Chris that we wanted this to be a real band. It's not just a project. So Rick Rubin is the guy who actually said, "What about Chris Cornell?" Morello says, "That's a good question. He was a big advocate of us jamming with Chris. Come to think of it, I think it was initially Rick's idea. I've known Chris as a friend before we made any music together, and I think Rick saw the possibility of it being a tremendously special meeting. He was right. From the moment we started playing with Chris, it was unbelievable. We wrote 21 songs in 19 days. This has been the most prolific and satisfying creative period in any of our lives." Guitar World asks, "When did you first meet Chris?" I think we met briefly on Lollapalooza in 1992 when Rage Against the Machine played the side stage and Chris was in Soundgarden. We met for just a second, and then he came to a barbecue or two at my house. Were you a fan of Chris Solo's album? Not the biggest fan. I like Chris Cornell when he's rockin' hard and riding free, and that's what he's doing here. The Audioslave record is surprisingly classic rock, Guitar World says. It definitely puts the listener in the realm of 70s hard rock. Is that an unflattering comparison? Morello replies, "Not at all. I think the record is unapologetically hard rockin'. It is without compromise or apology. At the same time, we've woven into it what I think are the very unique voices of the musicians. Tim, Brad, and I had never had the opportunity to play with someone who incorporates melody into the vocals. And in Chris Cornell, you have one of the best guys ever to do that. And Chris, in his previous bands, had never had the opportunity to play with musicians who can throw down a groove like we do. So it opened up brand new musical horizons. The first day we got together, we just jammed, and the next day we started writing songs. And they became, I believe, Light My Way, Bring 'Em Back Alive, and Exploder. So we started by writing some riff rockers, then we melded with influences that were almost Portishead-like. Rhythmically, we took a good hard look at bands like the Chemical Brothers and Portishead, which led to songs like The Last Remaining Light and Hypnotize. Oh yeah, look at this. Look at that spread. Oh yeah, love that pick. That's so Tom Morello. Soldiering on. And by day 6 or 7, we were writing songs like I Am the Highway or Like a Stone, which are completely different than anything that appears in any of our catalogs. Guitar World says, those last 2 songs you mentioned have really nice chord progressions. Would Chris come in and say, hey, if you play C to an A minor, ... No, Chris insisted on concentrating solely on the vocals and the melody. It was difficult at times. We'd say, Chris, bring us a pre-chorus. And sometimes he would go in the other room with a guitar and come back with a pre-chorus or bridge or something like that. But for the most part, the musical diversity we hear on the record came from Tim, Brad, and me being freed up creatively by having a singer who's phenomenal and who was incorporating melody. That just pushed us in another direction. All of a sudden, we were into the campfire jams, the Bob Dylan or Woody Guthrie songs I would strum to around the living room. I can now strum in rehearsal and make it a gorgeous song out of that. Some of the myriad of styles I would play on my own were now leaking into the band. At times, even Tim and Brad would do a double take, which was the case with the solo for I Am the Highway. I had more of a wacky Star Wars solo in mind, but it was hard to nail in the studio, and we ended up doing about 25 takes of it. At one point, I was just sort of noodling around in the same way that I would at home, very unconsciously, and that ended up being the keeper. Everyone thought it just had an emotional quality to it. Guitar World says, there are some very traditional bluesy guitar licks on the album, in Getaway Car, for instance. Morello answers, yeah, and again, that's the kind of stuff I've done for years, jamming with friends, but never had the courage to put on a record. It's a very honest kind of guitar playing. It's not hiding behind the more outer space sounds, but it is absolutely just as much a real part of my guitar playing, as genuine as any of the more left field stuff. The Last Remaining Light even has jazzy Wes Montgomery style octaves, Guitar World says. It absolutely does. Wes is one of my heroes. Albert King and Wes Montgomery are 2 of my favorite guitar players of all time. David Gilmour as well. There's some of that in there too. How am I doing so far, Steve? Thumbs up? All right. With the possible exception of the song Cochise, this is not an overly political album lyrically. Morello answers, no, it isn't. I think it's crucial that a lyricist write from his soul. There's a kind of personal politics in Chris's lyrics for some of the songs like Set It Off and Exploder. But for the most part, Chris's lyrics are wrapped in a dark, Edgar Allan Poe-ish poetic style that he has. And I think there's a lot of honesty and searching in those lyrics. But that doesn't mean that there has been an abandonment of politics. My determination is stronger than ever to have an impact in the world of activism. And to that end, along with Serge from System of a Down, we have established the Axis of Justice, which is a multi-pronged political organization. We sent it out on Ozfest, where Axis of Justice had a tent providing everything from first-hand, on-site help for kids that are physically and sexually abused to information on trying to stop the current international cycle of violence, to racism and freedom of speech issues. What we intend to do is send the Axis of Justice out on any tour. We will make our own network available to anyone who is interested. We have all the contacts in every city who can deal with every local issue. If you got someone who's a sexual abuse victim in Memphis, Tennessee, they can see someone at the Axis of Justice tent at that show and get help that day. If they feel that they're being censored from starting an underground newspaper at their school, there will be someone there who can advise them. It's axisofjustice.org if you want to check it out. And in addition to that, we're setting up an Axis of Justice radio network which will have music and politics. It's a way to focus like a laser on important issues and not have the politics ever to be clouded by band drama and business. It's something I'm very thrilled about, and it's coming together. Guitar World asks, you didn't write the lyrics to Cochise, of course, but is there a political dimension to that song? I can't speak for Chris, but I can tell you where the song name comes from. Cochise was the last great, undefeated, unbowed Native American chief. At one point in his life, some of the U.S. cavalry tricked and captured some of his family, tortured and hung them. He found the bodies hanging from a tree in the southwest corner of New Mexico and declared war on the entire Southwest. He went on a war path to end all war paths. It eventually caused thousands of settlers to leave the area and forts to close down for miles. It was an unbridled, merciless fury in which he exacted his revenge on an entire region of the nation. And this song sounds like that. After the record was completed, Chris left the band? Guitar World asks. That's true. There was a lot of miscommunication that went on, but at no time, even when Chris left the band, did we ever stop caring for each other or stop being good friends. And it was crystal clear after a couple of months that the only thing we all wanted to do was play with each other. So we got back together, and we've been back on track ever since. Was the album itself difficult to make? Morello replies, not really, but it took a long time to finish the record. We did something in the studio which Brad, Tim, and I never done before, which was a lot of rearranging of the songs. And we also recorded far more songs than we ever had before, almost twice as many that appear on the record. So we took our time, we made the songs right, dialed them in, and made sure that each take was the one to rock you properly. Guitar World says, the album contains what are arguably some of your wildest guitar sounds ever. The guitar solo in Shadow of the Sun, for example, there's a guitar melody that's being digitally fucked with, then a harmony comes in. That's not digital, Morello says. It's all live. It's all the toggle switch on the guitar. I have the toggle switch configured differently on a few of my guitars. So rather than the normal toggle, with one pickup off, one pickup on, this one has off, on, off. So it allows for a hummingbird wing kind of effect. Almost a gated sound? Correct. It sounds almost like you have a ream of paper that you flick. Is that what's going on the intro to Cochise as well? No, that's much simpler. It's just a real fast slapback delay. And I'm just whacking the strings to get that helicopter sound. Ah, that's incredible. I always wondered about that. Now I know. As on past records you've made, a lot of the tunes here have a little guitar intros that are musically unrelated to anything in the song itself. Are those intros nonetheless specifically composed for the track? Oh yeah, the intro to Set It Off, for example. I just knew that little intro piece was going to make for some ferocious droppage when that riff drops. I'll go out on a limb and say I was right. Unlike a Stone, what was the source of that wild pitch glide with echo sound? For that sound, my DigiTech Whammy Pedal is set 2 octaves up with the pedal fully depressed and a long delay on it. You just hit each note, bring it up 2 octaves, and then the delay makes it sound epic. Then there's a point where it dries up. No, it doesn't dry up. The echo lines up. Echo notes start sounding simultaneously with the main notes, so then you get all these weird harmonics. The echo is playing the ascending minor intervals. Guitar World says, geez, did you plan it that way? Or was this some cosmic accident? That was just a solo I played the day we wrote the song. However, the echo was set. That's how it lined up. I only have one echo setting for my things, and it always lines up like that when we play the song. But more so than ever before, there were some solos on this record that were composed. Normally, with the odd noise solos, it would just happen like that at rehearsal. But some of these were composed at home. Shadow of the Sun and What You Are were solos I just thought of in my head. I had to rush to a little tape recorder and squawk them out in an embarrassingly human tones so I could remember how they'd go. Then I'd go to the studio and try to turn that musical idea into guitar notes and feedback. The solo for What You Are is cool. There's a filtered wah sound that alternates with some kind of pitch bend sound. That's all one performance with a wah-wah pedal. It's 3 parts. The initial wow is a low B, and it's followed by hitting all the strings above the nut, which makes sort of a high-end sound. Then the third part is the whammy pedal set to 5th, and I'm just manipulating the whammy bar on the guitar to play that little shaky melody. Then at the end of each of the phrases, that's just toggling while making the bar go through the sweep of the pedal. It sounds much more complicated than it is. Yeah, it sounds complicated. You just don't think like a guitar player, do you? Morello replies, in the past, I tried to look outside of guitar players as influences. I looked at DJs or techno producers, but on this, I tried to look even beyond that. Two of my biggest influences on this album, especially for guitar solos, were comedian Richard Pryor and Racehorse Secretariat, each for different reasons. I watched a couple of Richard Pryor at the Apollo specials when he was at his peak, and I believe he is the greatest comedian of all time. There's so much timing in something like that, and you want to draw on that when you do a guitar solo. Humor as well. The guitar solo doesn't sound anything like Richard Pryor, but if you absorb the vibe of that and then start playing the guitar, it's very different than if you listen to Yngwie Malmsteen and then start playing guitar. Your head goes in a different direction. And in the case of Secretariat, there's something about the combination of intuition, ability, and divine intervention in the performance of a thoroughbred racehorse that's very inspiring. There's a supernatural element there that I tried to tap into on the guitar. Perhaps I was successful, perhaps not. But if you aim for Secretariat's Belmont record, the fastest any horse has ever run that was on a clock, it just makes your playing in some interesting directions. Have any of these new approaches led you to any new guitar gear? Not really. I'm rigidly unchanging when it comes to guitar and amps. Was there one main guitar for the album? There were several, depending on what tuning I was using. For the songs that are in drop D, I always use my stock early 80s Telecaster. The drop D songs on this album are Show Me How to Live and Light My Way. The last remaining light is a special case. I played on my Telecaster, which I always keep in drop D tuning, but the low strings is not used in that song, so you can play it like a regular A440 standard tuning. Why do you favor the Telecaster for drop D tuning? I just think it sounds great for that. To me, our drop D songs don't sound like grunge music or any other drop D stuff. I think it's because ours are done with a distorted single coil Telecaster pickup. It's not a humbucker. So it's not like I'm trying to out-manly the next band. I don't want to disparage any of the current hitmakers, but there's some that deserve it. What other guitars and tunings are on the record? Cochise, Set It Off, I'm the Highway, Hypnotize, and Getaway Car are all standard 440. Like a Stone is another special case. It's standard tuning intervals, but I believe I tune a guitar up either a half step or a whole step for that. In any case, all of the songs in standard tuning are played on my Arm the Homeless guitar, which has finally been retired. Toward the end of the album, it was replaced by the Soul Power guitar, which is a new Fender Strat. Did that make it onto the album? Yeah, I think I did some of the final overdubs and guitar solos with it, and it will be my main 440 guitar for playing live now. It's just a stock Fender that I had retrofitted with the same pickups and whammy bar as the Arm the Homeless guitar. What kind of vibrato arm system is it? It's a Floyd Rose knockoff. I believe Ibanez makes it. I like the ability to pull up on it, but also you can make excellent weapons out of imperfection. I love the people at Ibanez, but there's something about the bar that's poorly made. When you work it hard, it becomes sort of like a loose tooth in a socket. It wiggles in there a little bit. So if you mute the strings but wiggle the bar in the tooth socket, it creates a tone. It's sort of termite-like tone, which you can then manipulate with effects pedals and make music with it. That's on some intro somewhere on the album. I forget which one. Ibanez were making me a guitar, and they wanted to have some new whammy bar on there that works better. I told them, "You're missing a point. I want the worst one." Of course, it's the same thing with the whammy pedal. I only use the old red ones, not the reissue pedal. Guitar World asks, a lot of tonally innovative guitarists prefer gear that's normally thought of as flawed. Morello replies, yeah, there's this old Canadian pawn shop guitar that I have. No name, it's really light, made of plywood. I just call it the creamy guitar because it has a real creamy tone. On this album, I use it for all the songs that are in drop B tuning, which are Gasoline, What You Are, Shadow of the Sun, Bring 'Em Back Alive. I just put a big fat low B, a .052 or something, where the low E normally goes. It's a regular 6-string guitar. So I think that, yeah, this is one case where it's definitely important to have a guitar that might normally be thought of as substandard. It's not the latest high-tech, low-resonating humbucker to capture that new metal sound, which is why I think a song like Gasoline sounds different than any of the more traditional drop B stuff the kids are playing these days. Guitar World comments, it's also because you're not doing any of the things with chord shapes that most of them tend to do. There are certain stylistic cliches that they all seem to go for. Morello says, right. I think a lot of those cliches are built into that 7th-string guitar itself. I suppose it's a style of playing for some people. God bless them. That's perfectly fine. But one's fingers tend to gravitate towards a similar string. When you're all down that low playing, those bar chords at a certain point, only dogs can tell the difference. Guitar World comments, you wouldn't want the latest high-tech, low-resonating humbucker anyway. As you said earlier, you're more of a single coil guy. Morello says, right. And I mainly use the neck pickup, except for those toggling effects, because I'm doing all hammer-ons with my left hand while toggling with my right, so I need a hotter pickup for that. I also use the bridge pickup for feedback things. There's one song, Bring 'Em Back Alive, where there's a never-ending feedback snake. It relies on the non-stop feedback to hold for the duration of the entire solo. So the bridge pickup has its uses. Yeah, I did some overdubs with a Les Paul tuned to drop B, where I used a bridge pickup, the hotter quote-unquote rock pickup. Guitar World says the quote-unquote lead pickup, but my signature sound is really based on that single coil neck pickup through my 50-watt Marshall 2205 with a PV cabinet. There you go, folks. We got a secret. Yeah, although for some of the overdubs I use an old Music Man twin amp that I have. It has a real nice phaser sweep on it, because you can stop it anywhere in the sweep, which gives it some nice tonal variations. GW asks, the old whammy pedals are essential to your technique, as you've said, but what kind of wah-wah pedals do you use? Usually just a regular crybaby, but I have a number of them, and they're all inconsistent. I'm not thrilled with the sweep on any of them. There's too much of that cat hiss high end. I suppose it should be my responsibility to work that into some daring new solo, but I haven't found a way to make that one right. That's one sound that has me vexed. What kind of delay? Just an Ibanez digital delay pedal. Anything else in the chain? I had a flanger I never used. I just replaced it with a phaser the other day. Hopefully I'll find some use for that. There's also a tremolo pedal and a DOD EQ pedal, which I only use live and exclusively as a boost. It's set flat, with all the sliders up to 11. On solo parts, I need that in order to be heard over Timmy's massive bass sound. GW says, there are a lot of nice full-bodied clean tones on the album as well, on Getaway Car and on Shadow of the Sun, for instance. Morello replies, those are the same 3 main guitars we've been talking about into the same amps, but with the volume rolled back on the guitar. Most of them are just the guitar sounds from the basic track. That's something you can't really improve by overdubbing a quote-unquote better guitar tone, because it's the way all the instruments are melding in that perfect creative moment that creates the vibe that makes you want to put the song on the album in the first place. Also, a big part of those nice clean tones is the way Rick Rubin and the engineer mix the speaker cabinet. It's mic'd really close and you hear the fingers on the strings. There's a real immediacy to it. How do you see this record as slotting into the current music scene? I'm grateful that it doesn't, laughs Tom Morello. There's nothing like it on the radio, and there's nothing like it in the clubs or in the stadiums. And that's a great feeling. It's not like we have our own niche. We have our own field to play in. Guitar World says, that is, people should get it as long as they haven't been totally programmed by the crap the record companies have been putting out. Yeah, but in my life I felt the most fulfilled creatively and had the most success when I've done something that goes against convention. There were no political rock rap bands on the radio when we formed Rage Against the Machine. There were no bands remotely like Soundgarden when that band came into existence. Those bands created genres of music. I have no predictive powers, but I think it's when you're not trying to get on the radio, not trying to fit a clear channel format, that you arrive at some kind of true expression, and people gravitate toward it. That's our hope. This is certainly as honest music as we've ever made and I've ever heard. There you go. That wraps it up. Well, there it is, folks. Tom Morello, back in 2002, talking about Audioslave. What a classic, amazing album that is. If you haven't heard it in a while, do yourself a favor. Go check it out. The melodies on it, Chris Cornell's voice is absolutely unbelievable. The type of vocal melodies on there. And it was very refreshing to hear Tom Morello play a completely different style in some songs, in some spurts of songs, than Rage, what we were used to with Rage, right? I also should definitely read you at some point some of the other articles in this magazine because, there's some bangers on here. Pearl Jam, Foo Fighters, Tenacious D. There's an interview here with Sammy Hagar. Yeah, baby. More videos to come. Check out how cool Lenny Kravitz looks in the back there. Look at that. I'm telling you, man, there's no other rock star more in fashion, better dressed, cooler dressed rock star in the industry than this guy right here. All right. I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for the supervision, Steve. Really appreciate it. Thanks for listening. Rock on. Be good to each other. And I'll see you in the next video.